7 days had passed since Morgan Winters became someone else entirely. 7 days since an ancient ritual confirmed what prophecy had foretold. 7 days of learning to walk through halls that whispered with 3 centuries of history, of meeting eyes that held either hope or suspicion, of feeling a power stir beneath her skin that she still did not fully understand. The morning sun streamed through the infirmary windows of Silvermount Palace, casting long shadows across the stone floor as Morgan worked. A royal guard lay on the treatment table before her, his arm torn open from shoulder to elbow, blood pooling beneath him at an alarming rate. A training accident, they had called it. But Morgan had seen enough wounds in her years as a battlefield medic to know that this was no ordinary injury. The flesh had been ripped, not cut. Something with claws had done this. "Hold him steady," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had given orders in far worse circumstances than this. 2 assistants pressed down on the guard's shoulders as Morgan examined the wound. In her previous life, before wolves and prophecies and silver light, she would have reached for needle and thread, for antiseptic and bandages. But that life felt like a distant memory now, belonging to a woman who no longer existed. Morgan closed her eyes and reached for the power that hummed within her. It came more easily now than it had a week ago, rising to meet her call like a faithful hound responding to its master's whistle. Silver light bloomed from her fingertips, soft at first, then growing stronger, flowing into the wound like water seeking its lowest point. The guard gasped, his back arching off the table, but Morgan held firm. She could see the damage now, not with her eyes but with something deeper. Torn muscle fibers, severed blood vessels, the beginning of infection already taking root. Her power moved through it all, knitting and mending, burning away corruption and encouraging healthy tissue to grow. 3 minutes. That was all it took. 3 minutes, and a wound that would have taken weeks to heal properly was reduced to a thin pink scar. The assistant stared at her with a mixture of awe and fear. Morgan was growing accustomed to that look. "He'll need rest," she said, wiping her hands on a clean cloth. "And food. Healing takes energy, even when it happens quickly. Make sure he eats well for the next few days." She turned to leave but stopped when she noticed the 2 figures standing in the doorway. One was a man in his 50s, his face weathered by decades of service, a network of scars crisscrossing his forearms like a map of battles survived. This was Thorne, captain of the guard detail assigned to protect her. The other was younger, perhaps 25, with the eager alertness of someone still young enough to believe himself immortal. Marcus, they called him. Thorne's shadow, though not his son by blood. "That was impressive, my lady," Thorne said, his voice gruff but respectful. "The healers here have been trying to close that wound for an hour before you arrived." Morgan shrugged. "It's what I do, what I've always done, one way or another." She walked past them into the corridor, and they fell into step behind her, one on each side. This, too, had become routine. She was never alone anymore, never unguarded. It should have felt suffocating, but somehow it didn't. Perhaps because she understood the necessity. Perhaps because she had grown to appreciate the quiet competence of the men who watched over her. "How long have you 2 served together?" she asked as they walked. Thorne glanced at Marcus before answering. 15 years, my lady, since the boy was 10 years old." 10? Morgan raised an eyebrow. "That's young to start military training." "Wasn't training. Not at first." Thorne's voice grew distant, his eyes fixed on something only he could see. "His father was my closest friend. We fought together in the Southern Border War 30 years ago now. Saved each other's lives more times than I can count." He paused. "When Marcus was 10, his father took an arrow meant for me. Died in my arms, asking me to look after his boy." Morgan looked at Marcus, who walked with his chin high despite the weight of the story being told about him. "And you've been with Thorne ever since?" "He raised me, my lady, taught me everything I know, everything my father would have taught me if he'd lived." Marcus's voice was steady, proud. "I owe him my life, not because of any debt, but because of everything he gave me without ever asking for anything in return." "I owe his father my life," Thorne corrected quietly. "Taking care of Marcus isn't repaying a debt, it's honoring a brother." Morgan felt something tighten in her chest. She had known men like these during the war, men for whom loyalty was not a word, but a way of being. Men who would walk into fire for those they loved without a moment's hesitation. She had thought such men rare. Perhaps they were simply better at hiding. "This assignment," she said carefully, "protecting me. It's not exactly a frontline posting." Thorne's scarred face cracked into something that might have been a smile. "No, my lady, but it's the most important assignment I've ever had. Elder Moira told me herself. She said you're the key to everything. Said the fate of the 7 territories rests on your shoulders." He met her eyes directly. "I've fought in 3 wars and served 4 kings. I know important when I see it. And you, Lady Morgan, are the most important person in this palace, maybe in this whole world." Before Morgan could respond, they rounded a corner and nearly collided with another group approaching from the opposite direction. At its center walked Rowan Blackthorn, the Alpha King himself, deep in conversation with his sister Eleonora. He looked up at the near collision, and his amber eyes found Morgan's immediately. Something passed between them in that moment, something that had been growing stronger with each passing day. Morgan still didn't have a name for it, didn't know if she wanted one. "Lady Morgan," Rowan's voice was warm, warmer than a king's voice had any right to be. "I was just coming to find you, and I was just finishing in the infirmary." She gestured to Thorne and Marcus. "With my ever-present shadows." Eleonora smirked. "Getting used to royal life, are we?" "Getting used to never having a moment alone," Morgan corrected, but there was no real annoyance in her voice. "What did you need, Your Majesty?" Rowan's expression shifted, becoming more serious. "Elder Moira wants to see you. She says it's time to begin your training in earnest." The old seer had been visiting Morgan each day since the ritual of acknowledgement, teaching her the basics of controlling her newfound power. But those sessions had been gentle, exploratory. The way Rowan said training suggested something more intensive lay ahead. "Now?" "Now." Rowan fell into step beside her as they walked, dismissing the others with a subtle gesture. Only Thorne and Marcus remained, maintaining a respectful distance. "She says the power within you is growing faster than she anticipated. It needs to be shaped before it shapes you." Morgan thought of the silver light that had flowed so easily from her hands this morning. A week ago, summoning even a flicker had left her exhausted. Now it came as naturally as breathing. Was that growth normal? Or was something else happening? They found Elder Moira in the palace gardens, seated on a stone bench beneath an ancient oak tree. Despite her blindness, her clouded eyes seemed to track their approach with perfect accuracy. She was older than anyone Morgan had ever met, her face a landscape of wrinkles, her hands gnarled like the roots of the tree above her. But there was nothing frail about her presence. Power radiated from her like heat from a forge. "Sit," Moira commanded, gesturing to the grass before her. "Both of you." Morgan sat cross-legged on the ground. After a moment's hesitation, Rowan did the same. A king, sitting in the dirt like a common soldier. Morgan filed that away as another thing she was learning about him. "The power within you is not simply growing," Moira began without preamble. "It is awakening. There is a difference. Growth is gradual, natural. What is happening to you is neither." "What do you mean?" "Close your eyes, reach for your power, but do not use it. Simply feel it." Morgan obeyed. The silver light was there, waiting, eager to answer her call. But beneath it, around it, she sensed something else, something vast and ancient, stirring in depths she had not known existed within her. "I feel it," she whispered, "something bigger than before." "Helena Silvermark left more than memories in her bloodline," Moira said. "She left fragments of her own power, dormant, waiting for the right vessel. You are that vessel, Morgan Winters, and now that you have been acknowledged, those fragments are merging with your own essence." "Is that dangerous?" "Everything about power is dangerous." Moira's blind eyes seemed to bore into her. The greater the power, the greater the danger, but also the greater the potential for good. That is why you must learn to control it, not suppress it, not deny it, but control it. Make it yours. How? By understanding what you can do. Moira raised one gnarled hand and pointed at Rowan. "Look at him, but not with your eyes. Look deeper." Morgan turned her gaze to Rowan, then closed her physical eyes and reached out with her power. What she saw made her gasp. Colors. Rowan was surrounded by colors she had no names for, swirling patterns of energy that pulsed with his heartbeat. She could see the strength in him, coiled like a sleeping tiger. She could see old wounds, scars that went deeper than skin, pain that had never fully healed. And she could see something else, a thread of silver light connecting him to her, thin as a spider's web but strong as steel. "What is that?" she breathed. "The connection between us?" "You see it?" Rowan's voice was surprised, almost vulnerable. "I've felt it since the night you saved me, but I didn't know it was visible." "It wasn't until now," Moira said. "Her power grows, and with it her perception. Soon she will be able to see illness as easily as she sees health, deception as easily as truth, the hidden as easily as the visible." Morgan opened her eyes, her heart racing. The colors faded, but the memory of them remained, seared into her mind. That's how Helena knew who to trust, she realized. How she built the peace that lasted 3 centuries. She could see people's true natures. Among other things, Moira's expression grew grave. But with greater sight comes greater burden. There are things in this world better left unseen, Morgan Winters. Things that once witnessed cannot be forgotten. The question is not whether you will see them, but whether you will have the strength to bear what you see. Before Morgan could respond, a commotion erupted at the garden's edge. Shouts, running footsteps, the clash of metal. Thorne and Marcus immediately positioned themselves between Morgan and the disturbance, hands on their weapons. A moment later, a young page burst through the hedges, his face pale with fear. "Your Majesty, my lady, you must come at once. A rider has arrived from Ironwood. He says—" The boy swallowed hard. "He says there's been a massacre." The war room of Silvermount Palace had stood for 300 years, carved from the living rock beneath the palace itself. Torches of silver fire burned in sconces along the walls, casting dancing shadows across the massive stone table at the room's center. The greatest battles in the history of the 7 territories had been planned within these walls. The greatest defeats had been mourned here. Tonight, another tragedy would be added to that long history. Morgan stood near the head of the table, Rowan beside her. Around them had gathered the most powerful figures in Silvermount. General Ravencrest, commander of the royal armies, his hair more gray than black now, but his posture still that of a warrior. Lord Thornfield, representative of the noble houses, his expression unreadable. Princess Eleonora, still in her traveling clothes, having rushed here directly from the training grounds. Elder Moira, her blind eyes seeing more than any of them. And at the center of attention, a young man who looked as though he had ridden through hell itself to reach them. Prince Lysander of Ironwood was perhaps 27 years old, with hair black as midnight and eyes the color of storm clouds. Under normal circumstances, he might have been handsome in a sharp, aristocratic way. But there was nothing normal about his circumstances now. His riding clothes were stiff with dried blood. A deep gash marked his cheek, still oozing, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone who had seen things no one should ever have to see. "Tell them," Rowan commanded, his voice gentle but firm. "Tell them everything." Lysander's jaw tightened. When he spoke, his voice was rough, as if he had been screaming for hours and had only recently stopped. Eldergrove, a village on the eastern border of Ironwood territory. 3 days ago, it was home to nearly 300 people, humans and shifters living together, as they have for generations. He paused, swallowing hard. Now it's a graveyard. The silence in the room was absolute. Morgan felt her heart constrict. 217 shifters, Lysander continued, his voice mechanical now, reciting numbers as if they were the only way to keep the horror at bay. 63 humans, men, women, children, all dead, not a single survivor. "How?" Ravencrest demanded. "What force could destroy an entire village without anyone escaping to raise the alarm?" "They came at night, moved through the village like shadows. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was too late." Lysander's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I arrived the next morning with a patrol. We had received reports of suspicious activity in the area. We thought it might be bandits." His voice cracked. "What we found was not the work of bandits." He reached into his cloak and withdrew something, throwing it onto the table with a clatter. A black arrow, its head gleaming with unnatural silver light. Something dark and oily seemed to writhe around it, though Morgan couldn't tell if that was real or simply her newly awakened senses perceiving what others could not. "Silver arrowheads," Rowan said, picking up the arrow carefully. His face twisted with discomfort as the metal touched his skin. "But there's something else, something wrong with it." "Cursed!" Elder Moira said, stepping forward. Her hand reached out, finding the arrow with uncanny precision. She held it without flinching, her blind eyes fixed on something only she could see. Black magic. Very old. Very powerful. Silver hunters? Eleonora asked, voicing the fear that was on everyone's mind. Their weapons, certainly. Moira turned the arrow over in her hands. But silver hunters have never wielded magic like this. Someone has given them new tools. Someone with knowledge that should have been lost centuries ago. Morgan felt a chill run down her spine. The nightmare she had experienced the night before came flooding back. The burning city, the bodies, and at the center of it all, a figure with hair white as snow and eyes of polished silver. "Let me see it," she heard herself say. Every eye in the room turned to her. "The arrow," she clarified. "Let me touch it. My power has been growing. I might be able to see something the rest of you cannot." Rowan moved to stop her, but Moira held up a hand. "She is right to try, but be careful, child. What you see may not be pleasant." Morgan took the arrow from Moira's hands. The moment her fingers closed around it, the world vanished. She was no longer in the war room. She was standing in the village of Eldergrove, but it was not the village as it existed now. This was Eldergrove 3 nights ago, in the moments before everything ended. The village was quiet, peaceful. Smoke rose from chimneys. Light glowed behind shuttered windows. Somewhere, a dog barked, a child laughed, the sounds of ordinary life, precious and fragile. Then the shadows began to move. They came from everywhere at once, from the forest's edge, from the darkness between buildings, from the night itself. Black-cloaked figures moving with inhuman silence, spreading through the village like a plague. Each one bore the mark of a silver arrow on their chest. Silver hunters! Morgan watched helplessly as they began their work. A door kicked in. A scream cut short. A spray of blood, black in the moonlight. They moved with terrible efficiency, killing without hesitation, without mercy. Men who tried to fight, women who tried to flee, children who didn't understand what was happening. And then she saw him. He stood on the roof of the village's largest building, observing the carnage below with the detachment of someone watching insects. His hair was white as fresh snow. His eyes were silver, bright as mirrors in the darkness. He wore robes of black and silver, and power radiated from him like heat from a sun. This was the figure from her nightmare, but he was no dream. As if sensing her presence, he turned. His silver eyes met hers across time and space, and his thin lips curved into a smile. "I know you're watching, little Helena." His voice was silk and poison. Or should I say Morgan? Morgan tried to pull back, to break the connection, but she was frozen, trapped. "I have waited 300 years for this moment," the figure continued. 3 centuries in darkness, dreaming of the day when Helena's heir would finally awaken. And now here you are, so full of potential, so beautifully ignorant of what you truly are. "Who are you?" Morgan managed to force the words out. "You know who I am. You've read about me in Helena's journals. You've heard the stories. I am the beginning and the ending. I am the original sin and the final judgment." He spread his arms wide. "I am Aldrich Silvermark, and I have been waiting for you. You're supposed to be sealed, imprisoned." Aldrich laughed, and the sound was worse than the screams of the dying below. "Seals weaken, prisons crumble, especially when the key to the lock finally appears." He took a step toward her, though he remained on the distant rooftop. Somehow the distance meant nothing. "Your awakening, dear Morgan, is what set me free. Every time your power grows, my prison weakens. You are liberating me with every breath you take." "No," Morgan shook her head, horror rising in her throat. "That can't be true." "Can't it?" Aldrich's smile widened. "Ask the old seer. Ask the scholars. They know. They've always known. That's why some of them hoped you would never appear. Better to let the bloodline die than to risk setting me free." The village burned around them now, flames reaching toward the blood-red moon above. The screams had stopped. There was no one left to scream. "I'll stop you," Morgan said, finding her voice, finding her courage. "Whatever it takes." "Will you?" Aldrich tilted his head, studying her with curiosity. "How? By gathering the Covenant stones? By trying to seal me again?" He chuckled. "Helena tried that. It cost her everything, and all it bought was time. 300 years. A blink of an eye for something like me." He stepped closer still, and now Morgan could see his face clearly. There was something terrible in it, something that had once been human but had long since left humanity behind. But there was something else too, buried deep beneath the madness and malice, a flicker of pain, of loss, of something that might once have been love. "I will give you a choice, Morgan Winters." The same choice Helena refused. Aldrich extended his hand toward her. "Join me. Stand at my side as we reshape this world. Your power combined with mine could create an empire that would last for millennia." "Never." That's what she said too. For just a moment, sadness crossed his face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold determination. "Very well. We do this the hard way. I have waited 3 centuries. A few more weeks mean nothing." He stepped back, spreading his arms again. "Go. Tell your king what you have seen. Gather your allies. Collect your stones. It won't matter. When the 7th red moon rises, I will be free completely. And then, dear Morgan, we will see whose power is truly greater." The vision shattered like glass. Morgan found herself on the floor of the war room, Rowan's arms around her, voices calling her name from far away. Her entire body was shaking, cold sweat drenched her clothes. The arrow lay beside her, smoking slightly, its dark magic seemingly exhausted. "Morgan!" Rowan's voice cut through the fog in her mind. "Morgan, can you hear me?" She forced her eyes to focus on his face, on the concern written across his features, on the amber eyes that held such warmth, such worry. "I saw him," she whispered. "The one behind the attack, the one behind everything." Silence fell over the war room. "Aldrich Silvermark," Elder Moira said, and her voice was older than Morgan had ever heard it, older and heavier with grief. "He has awakened." "That's impossible." Lord Thornfield's voice was sharp with disbelief. "Aldrich was sealed 3 centuries ago. He should remain sealed for another 300 years at least." "The seal was designed to last until Helena's heir appeared." Moira turned her blind eyes toward Morgan. "Her appearance has begun the unraveling. Each day her power grows, the seal weakens further." "Then we must stop her power from growing," Thornfield said. "Suppress it somehow." "That would kill her." Rowan's voice was ice. "And I will not allow that." "Your Majesty, if she is the cause of—" "She is not the cause." Rowan rose to his feet, pulling Morgan up with him. His arm remained around her waist, supporting her. "Aldrich is the cause. The seal was always temporary. Morgan's appearance simply accelerated the timeline. Would you prefer we face Aldrich without her? Without the only person who has a chance of standing against him?" Thornfield fell silent, but his eyes remained suspicious. "What did he say to you?" Eleonora asked. "Aldrich, what did he want?" Morgan steadied herself, forcing strength into her voice. "He offered me a choice, to join him or oppose him. He seemed almost amused by the idea that I might fight him." "Arrogant," Ravencrest muttered, "even for someone who believes himself immortal." "Is he immortal?" Morgan looked to Moira. "Can he truly not be killed?" The old seer was quiet for a long moment. 300 years ago we tried everything. Swords, spears, arrows, fire, poison. Nothing could end him. He had absorbed too many souls, too much power. In the end, Helena used every drop of strength she possessed simply to bind him, to trap him in a prison between life and death. "The cost?" Morgan asked, already knowing she wouldn't like the answer. "Her life. Not immediately, but inevitably. The seal drained her continuously for the decade she survived after creating it. She died at 43 years old, looking like a woman of 90. The weight of that sacrifice settled over the room like a shroud. "There has to be another way," Morgan said. "Something we can do that Helena couldn't." "Perhaps there is." Moira's voice carried a note of hope, fragile as glass. "Helena left records in the memory tower, within the Forbidden Zone. Knowledge she didn't have time to use herself. If you could reach the tower, access her memories, then we go to the tower." Morgan straightened, pulling away from Rowan's support to stand on her own. "How do we get there?" "The Forbidden Zone has been sealed for 3 centuries, Ravencrest said. "No one enters or leaves. No one except the heir of Helena Silvermark." Moira's blind eyes fixed on Morgan. "You carry her bloodline, her power. The barriers that stop others will open for you." "Then I'll leave at dawn." "Not alone," Rowan stepped forward. "I'm going with you." "Your Majesty," Thornfield interrupted, "you cannot abandon the kingdom at a time like this." "I am not abandoning anything." Rowan's voice brooked no argument. "I am doing what my ancestor Alaric did 300 years ago, standing beside the Silver Queen against the darkness." He looked at Morgan, and something unspoken passed between them. "Where she goes, I go." "And I," Eleonora said, stepping forward. "Someone needs to watch your back, brother." "And I." The voice came from Lysander, surprising everyone. The Ironwood prince had been silent since finishing his account, lost in his own grief. Now he raised his head, his storm-gray eyes burning with cold fire. "Eldergrove was on Ironwood soil. My people died there. His voice cracked. "My sister was visiting relatives in that village. She was 8 years old." The silence that followed was absolute. "I found her body myself." Lysander's voice was barely a whisper now. "She was still holding her doll, the one I gave her for her birthday last month." He met Morgan's eyes, and in his gaze she saw grief transformed into something harder, colder, more dangerous. "I don't care what it takes. I don't care what it costs. I will see Aldrich Silvermark destroyed, and if you are the one who can make that happen, then I will follow you to the gates of hell itself." Morgan held his gaze for a long moment, then she nodded once. "We leave at dawn, Rowan, Eleonora, Lysander, and myself. A small group will move faster than an army." "You'll need protection," Thorne said from the doorway. Morgan had almost forgotten he was there. "I'll select a team of my best, 5 guards, no more, small enough to move quickly, strong enough to be useful in a fight." "Including yourself?" Morgan asked. "Including myself." Thorne's scarred face was set with determination. "My last assignment before retirement was supposed to be watching over your chambers, my lady. Somehow I suspect that assignment just got significantly more complicated." A ghost of a smile crossed his features. "But then again, I never did like easy jobs." Then it settled. Rowan looked around the room. "We leave at dawn. General Ravencrest, you'll command in my absence. Thornfield, ensure the nobles remain calm. Moira, I will do what I can to slow Aldrich's awakening," the old seer said, "though I fear there is little that can stop it now. The 7th red moon is 21 days away. That is how long you have to find a solution. 21 days, 3 weeks to save the world." "Then we'd better not waste any time," Morgan said. As the War Council broke up, each member hurrying to their assigned tasks, Rowan caught Morgan's arm. "Stay for a moment," he said quietly. They waited until the room had emptied. Even Thorne and Marcus withdrew to the corridor outside, though Morgan knew they would be within earshot if needed. "You're scared," Rowan said. It wasn't a question. "Terrified," Morgan admitted. "A week ago, I was a healer living alone at the edge of a village. Now I'm supposed to face a 300-year-old monster who killed an entire village just to send a message. You're not facing him alone." "I know." Morgan looked up at him, at the king who had become something more than a king to her in the space of 7 days. "That's the only reason I'm not running away right now." Rowan moved closer, his hand rising to cup her face. The touch sent warmth spreading through her, pushing back the cold that had settled in her bones since the vision. "When you healed me that night," he said softly, "I felt something. A connection. I didn't understand it then. I'm not sure I understand it now. But I know this." His amber eyes held hers. "Whatever is between us, whatever it means, I will not let anything happen to you. Not Aldrich, not his hunters, not even death itself." That's a bold promise for a mortal to make. "I'm an Alpha King." A hint of his usual confidence returned. "Bold promises are part of the job description." Despite everything, Morgan felt herself smile. "You're also an idiot for volunteering to walk into the Forbidden Zone with a woman you've known for a week." "Ah, but what a week it's been." Rowan leaned closer. "Besides, I have it on good authority that you're worth following to the gates of hell. Prince Lysander said so, and he seemed quite sincere." Morgan laughed, surprising herself. "You heard that?" "I heard a man who lost his sister offer his loyalty to a stranger because he believes she can bring him justice. That tells me something important." "What?" "That you inspire people." Rowan's voice grew serious again. "In a crisis, that's the most valuable ability anyone can have. More valuable than strength, more valuable than magic. Because when people believe in you, they fight harder. They sacrifice more. They become more than they ever thought they could be." He released her face, but took her hand in his. "Helena had that gift, and so do you." They stood together in silence for a long moment, hands clasped, drawing strength from each other. Outside, Morgan could hear the sounds of a palace preparing for war. Messengers running, soldiers mustering, weapons being sharpened. "We should rest," she finally said. "Dawn will come early." "It always does." Rowan squeezed her hand once, then released it. "Try to sleep, Morgan. Whatever waits for us in the Forbidden Zone, you'll need your strength." But that night, sleep would not come easy. Morgan stood on the balcony of her chambers, looking out over Silvermount. The city spread below her in concentric rings, beautiful even in the darkness. Lights flickered in windows, fires burned in hearths. People went about their lives, most of them unaware that everything they knew was threatened by a darkness older than their oldest ancestors. She felt him before she heard him, a presence at the edge of her perception, warm, familiar. "You should be sleeping," she said without turning around. Rowan moved to stand beside her at the balcony railing. "So should you. I keep seeing them. The people in Eldergrove, the way they died." Morgan closed her eyes. "Lysander's sister was 8 years old. She was holding a doll." "I know. How do we fight something that can do that? Something that has no conscience, no mercy, no hesitation?" Rowan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with his own grief. "My father was assassinated 6 months ago. A silver arrow through the heart while he was on patrol near the southern border. We never found who did it." Morgan turned to look at him. "You think it was Aldrich?" "Now I do. The timing makes sense. If he was already preparing for his return, removing strong leaders would be a logical first step." Rowan's jaw tightened. "My father was a great king, a great man. He died in my arms, Morgan. I watched the light leave his eyes while I could do nothing to stop it. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be angry." Rowan met her eyes, and she saw in them the same cold fire she had seen in Lysander's. "Grief is a luxury we can't afford right now, but anger is fuel. It will keep us moving when exhaustion tells us to stop. It will keep us fighting when fear tells us to run." "Is that how you cope with anger?" "It's how I survive." Rowan turned back to the view. "But I've learned something in the months since my father died. Anger isn't enough. Revenge isn't enough. What we really need is justice. And justice isn't blind rage. Justice is purpose. It's doing what needs to be done, not because of what we feel, but because of what's right." Morgan considered his words. Helena's vision wasn't destruction. It was peace. A world where humans and shifters could coexist, where no one had to fear the other. She achieved it for a time, 3 centuries of relative peace, an incredible accomplishment. But it didn't last. "Nothing lasts forever," Rowan's voice softened. "The question isn't whether it will last. The question is whether it's worth fighting for while it does. I believe the answer is yes. I believe that even a day of peace is worth a lifetime of war. I believe that even a single life saved is worth any price." Morgan felt something shift within her. The fear was still there, the uncertainty. But beneath them, something else was growing. Not anger exactly, not purpose exactly, something between, something stronger. "Aldrich offered me a choice," she said, "to join him or oppose him. I told him never." She turned to face Rowan fully, but it wasn't until just now that I understood why. "Why?" "Because of people like you, like Lysander, who lost his sister and is channeling his grief into action instead of despair. Like Thorn, who is preparing to walk into danger because he believes protecting me is more important than protecting himself. Like Marcus, who stands beside the man who raised him, ready to die for the same cause his father died for." Morgan felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. "Helena created a world worth protecting. You all are proof of that, and I will not let Aldrich destroy it. I won't let him win, no matter what it costs me." Rowan stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and took her hand in his. "My ancestor Alaric stood beside Helena for 20 years, he said quietly. He was there when she first awakened her power. He was there when she confronted Aldrich. He was there at the end, holding her hand as she faded away, having given everything to seal her brother away. I know the stories. What the stories don't tell you is that Alaric never stopped loving her, even after she was gone, even after he married someone else, had children, built a dynasty. Part of his heart always belonged to her." Rowan squeezed her hand. "I used to think that was tragic. A man living his whole life haunted by a ghost. But now... Now I think maybe it is something else, something more." His amber eyes held hers in the moonlight. "Some connections transcend time, transcend death, transcend everything we think we understand about the world." He raised her hand to his lips, pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Whatever happens in the days ahead, Morgan Winters, I want you to know something. Meeting you is the most important thing that has ever happened to me. Not because of prophecy, not because of politics, because of you. The woman who opened her door to a wounded stranger in a blizzard. The woman who saw past the monster to the man underneath. Morgan felt her heart beating faster. Rowan, I know this isn't the time for declarations. He released her hand, stepping back. We have a war to fight, a world to save. But when it's over, he smiled, and it was the most genuine smile she had seen from him. When it's over, I would very much like to explore whatever this is between us, if you're willing. Morgan found herself smiling back. I think I'd like that too. They stood together on the balcony for a while longer, watching the moon rise over Silvermount. Not touching, not speaking, just existing in the same space, drawing comfort from each other's presence. Tomorrow would bring danger. Tomorrow would bring fear. Tomorrow would begin a journey that might end in their deaths. But tonight, for just a few precious hours, there was peace. And that, Morgan realized, was what they were fighting for. Not just to defeat Aldrich, not just to survive, but to preserve moments like these, moments of connection, moments of hope, moments when two people could stand together in the darkness and believe that dawn would come. She thought of Lysander, grieving his sister but still finding the strength to fight. She thought of Thorn and Marcus, bound by love that transcended blood. She thought of Elder Moira, who had witnessed 3 centuries of history and still believed in the possibility of a better future. She thought of all the people in Silvermount, in Ironwood, in all the 7 territories, going about their lives, loving their families, building their dreams, unaware of the shadow that threatened to consume everything they held dear. They were all worth fighting for, every single one. Get some rest, she told Rowan. Dawn will come soon. As my lady commands. He bowed slightly, a hint of his royal formality returning, but his eyes remained warm. Sleep well, Morgan Winters. Tomorrow we change the world. He left her alone on the balcony, his footsteps fading into the distance. Morgan stayed a moment longer, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, Aldrich was watching too, plotting, preparing, waiting for the 7th red moon to rise and set him free completely. But he was not the only one preparing. Morgan Winters, healer of the village edge, acknowledged heir of the Silver Queen, was preparing too, and she would not go gently into the darkness. She would go with fire and silver light, with courage and determination, with the strength of all those who stood beside her. And may the gods help anyone who got in her way. The night deepened around her, but Morgan no longer felt afraid. For the first time since this impossible journey began, she felt ready. Ready to fight, ready to lead, ready to become whoever she needed to be to save the world that Helena Silvermark had built and that Aldrich Silvermark sought to destroy. Dawn was coming, and with it, the beginning of the end. Dawn broke cold and gray over Silvermount, the sun struggling to pierce through clouds that hung low and heavy with the promise of snow. Morgan stood in the palace courtyard, watching as the final preparations were made for their departure. Horses stamped and snorted in the chill air. Soldiers checked weapons and supplies with the practiced efficiency of men who had done this 1,000 times before. Their party was small, as they had agreed. Rowan sat astride a massive black stallion, his traveling cloak doing little to disguise the warrior beneath. Eleonora was mounted beside him on a gray mare, her hand resting casually on the sword at her hip. Lysander had changed from his blood-stained clothes into fresh riding gear, but the haunted look in his eyes remained unchanged. And then there were the guards, 5 of them, as Thorn had promised. The captain himself rode at the head of the formation, his scarred face impassive as he surveyed the courtyard. Marcus was at his side, young and eager despite the gravity of their mission. The other 3 were veterans all, men whose names Morgan had learned just that morning. Garrett, a quiet man in his 40s with steady hands and steadier eyes. Willem, broad-shouldered and weathered. And Jonas, the youngest of the veterans, perhaps 35, with a quick smile that seemed out of place given the circumstances. Morgan mounted the white horse that had been prepared for her. Moonshade, they called her, a gift from the royal stables. The animal seemed to sense something in Morgan, responding to her lightest touch with an eagerness that the stablemaster had called unprecedented. She knows what you are, Rowan had told her. Animals can sense the silver power. It calls to something primal in them. Now, as they prepared to ride into the unknown, Morgan found comfort in the horse's warmth beneath her. At least something in this mad new world made sense. Elder Moira stood at the edge of the courtyard, her blind eyes fixed on Morgan with unsettling accuracy. She had come to see them off, though Morgan suspected her true purpose was to deliver a final warning. "The journey to the Forbidden Zone will take 2 days if you ride hard," the old seer said. "But speed is not your greatest concern. The Silver Hunters know you are coming. They have eyes everywhere." "Let them watch," Lysander said, his voice hard. "I welcome the chance to kill a few more of them." "Vengeance clouds judgment, young prince." Moira's voice carried no rebuke, only truth. "Your sister's death demands justice, not recklessness. Dead men cannot deliver justice." Lysander's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Moira turned back to Morgan. "The barriers around the Forbidden Zone will recognize your blood. They will open for you. But be warned, what lies within has been untouched for 3 centuries. The tower holds Helena's memories, her knowledge, her secrets. But it also holds her regrets, her failures, her pain. You must be prepared to witness all of it." "I understand." "Do you?" Moira stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper only Morgan could hear. "Helena sealed away more than her brother child. She sealed away parts of herself, the parts that loved him, the parts that were broken by what she had to do. When you enter that tower, you will not simply learn her history. You will live it, feel it, become it, for a time." Her gnarled hand found Morgan's and squeezed with surprising strength. "Do not lose yourself in her memories. Do not forget who you are." Before Morgan could respond, the gates of the courtyard swung open. General Ravencrest stood there with a contingent of soldiers, ready to see them off. "The road is clear as far as our scouts can determine," the general reported. "But we've received word of Silver Hunter activity in the northern passes. You may want to consider an alternate route." "We don't have time for alternate routes." Rowan urged his horse forward. "Every day we delay is a day Aldrich grows stronger. We go north, through the passes." Ravencrest nodded, though concern was evident in his eyes. "Then may the old gods watch over you, your majesty. All of you." They rode out through the gates of Silvermount as the first snowflakes began to fall. A small band of travelers setting out to challenge a darkness that had waited 300 years for this moment. Behind them, the city continued its preparations for war. Before them lay the unknown. The first day passed without incident. They rode hard through forest and field, stopping only to rest the horses and take brief meals. Conversation was sparse. Each of them was lost in their own thoughts, their own fears, their own hopes. As evening fell, they made camp in a small clearing surrounded by ancient oaks. A stream trickled nearby, its water clear and cold. The guards established a perimeter, while Eleonora started a fire and Lysander tended to the horses. Morgan found herself sitting on a fallen log, watching as Thorn moved through the camp with the ease of long practice. "You've done this before," she said as he passed. Thorn paused, a hint of amusement crossing his scarred features. "Once or twice, my lady. The Southern Border War lasted 5 years. I spent most of it sleeping on ground harder than this." "Tell me about it." He raised an eyebrow. "The war?" "If you don't mind. I'd rather hear about real battles than think about what's coming." Thorn was quiet for a moment. Then he sat down on the log beside her, his movements careful, controlled. Everything about him spoke of discipline forged through decades of service. "I was 23 when it started," he began, fresh out of training, convinced I was going to be a hero. 3 months in, I learned what war really was. Not glory, not honor, just blood and mud and men dying in ways no one should have to see. "But you survived." "I survived because of the men beside me. Garrett's father was one of them. Best soldier I ever knew. He could read a battlefield the way a scholar reads a book. Always knew where the enemy would strike next. Always knew where to position our forces." Thorn's voice softened. "He saved my life at the Battle of Thornwood Pass. Took an arrow meant for me. Died in my arms asking me to look after his boy." "Marcus?" "Marcus was 10 years old when his father died. I brought the news to his mother myself, watched her collapse, watched Marcus try to be strong for her, this child who suddenly had to be the man of the house." Thorn's hands clenched briefly. "I couldn't bring his father back, but I could keep my promise. I took Marcus in, trained him, raised him as my own. He loves you, and I love him, not as a replacement for the son I never had. as himself, as the good man his father would have been proud of. Thorn met Morgan's eyes. "That's why I volunteered for this mission, my lady. Not because I believe in prophecy, not because I care about politics, because Marcus volunteered first, and I will not let him face danger without me at his side." Morgan felt a lump form in her throat. What did his mother say? When he enlisted? "She died 3 years ago. Fever took her. Marcus was with her at the end, holding her hand." Thorn's voice grew even quieter. "After that, the army was all he had, the army and me." They sat in silence for a while, watching the fire that Eleonora had built grow and crackle. Across the clearing, Marcus was laughing at something Jonas had said, his young face bright in the firelight. He looked so young, so full of life. "I'll protect him," Morgan said quietly. "Whatever happens, I'll do everything in my power to bring him home safe." Thorn looked at her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "I believe you will, my lady. I believe you will." The second day began with frost on the ground and tension in the air. They had crossed into the northern highlands, where the trees grew sparse and the wind bit with cruel intensity. The passes that would lead them to the Forbidden Zone lay ahead, cutting through mountains that had stood since before the first humans walked this land. It was Lysander who first noticed something wrong. "We're being followed," he said quietly, urging his horse alongside Rowan's. "I've seen movement in the trees behind us twice now." Rowan's eyes narrowed. "How many?" "I can't tell. They're keeping their distance, but they're definitely there." Thorn moved up to join them, his hand resting on his sword hilt. "Silver hunters?" "Most likely." Rowan's voice was grim. "They must have been tracking us since we left Silvermount." "Or they were already positioned here," Morgan said, a chill running down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. "Aldrich knew we would come this way. He could have sent them ahead." "Then we spring the trap on our terms." Eleonora's eyes were bright with the prospect of combat. "Find a defensible position and let them come to us." "No." Rowan shook his head. "If they have numbers, a defensive position just means we die slower. We push forward, try to reach the Forbidden Zone before they can cut us off. And if they attack before we get there, then we fight." Rowan looked at each of them in turn. "Stay close, stay alert, and if combat begins, remember, Morgan is our priority. Whatever happens, she reaches that tower." They pushed their horses harder, eating miles with desperate speed. The mountains rose around them, jagged peaks crowned with snow. The path narrowed as they climbed, switching back and forth up increasingly steep terrain. It was in a narrow pass, with rock walls rising on either side, that the silver hunters finally made their move. They came from above, 20 of them at least, maybe more, dropping from concealed positions on the cliff faces. They wore black cloaks with the silver arrow emblem on their chests, and they moved with the inhuman coordination that spoke of careful planning and ruthless training. The first wave targeted the horses. Arrows hissed through the air, finding flesh with sickening thuds. Garrett's mount went down screaming, throwing him to the ground. Willem's horse reared, nearly crushing him before he managed to roll clear. "Dismount!" Thorn bellowed. "Form up around Lady Morgan!" Chaos erupted. Morgan found herself pulled from Moonshade's back by Marcus, who shoved her toward a large boulder that offered some protection from the arrows. She tried to protest, to tell him she could fight, but there was no time for arguments. The silver hunters were already upon them. She had seen men fight before. In the war, she had witnessed battles that would haunt her nightmares for the rest of her life. But she had never seen anything like this. Rowan transformed. One moment he was a man, the Alpha King in his traveling clothes, sword drawn and ready. The next moment he was something else entirely. A wolf the size of a horse, black as midnight, with eyes that burned like molten amber. He launched himself at the nearest hunter with a roar that shook the very stones beneath them. The hunter died before he could scream, Rowan's jaws closing around his throat with terrible finality. But more were coming, always more. Eleonora fought like a woman possessed, her sword singing through the air in arcs of silver death. 3 hunters fell to her blade in as many heartbeats. 4, 5. But for everyone she cut down, 2 more seemed to take their place. Lysander fought with cold fury, his grief transformed into deadly precision. He moved through the hunters like a dancer of death, each strike calculated, each movement efficient. The lessons he had learned in Ironwood's fighting pits were evident in every motion. Thorn and his guards formed a defensive ring around Morgan's position, their experience showing in the way they covered each other's weaknesses, filled each other's gaps. Jonas fell first, a hunter's blade finding the joint in his armor. He went down without a sound, his quick smile forever silenced. "No!" Marcus lunged forward, trying to reach his fallen comrade, and in doing so left a gap in the formation. A hunter exploited it instantly, slipping through the defense like a shadow, his silver dagger aimed at Morgan's heart. Time seemed to slow. Morgan saw the blade coming, saw the death that rode its edge. She raised her hand instinctively, power surging up from somewhere deep within her, and silver light erupted from her palm. The hunter flew backward as if struck by a giant's fist, crashing against the cliff wall with bone-shattering force. He did not get up. But the exertion left Morgan staggering, her vision blurring. She had never used her power offensively before. The drain was immense. "Morgan!" Rowan's voice, somehow human despite his wolf form, reached her through the haze. He was fighting his way toward her, leaving bodies in his wake. But more hunters kept appearing. They were going to be overwhelmed. And then she saw Marcus fall. A hunter had gotten behind their formation, his blade finding the gap between Marcus's helmet and his shoulder guard. Blood sprayed in a crimson arc. The young guard crumpled, his sword falling from nerveless fingers. Thorn's scream was barely human. He threw himself at the hunter who had struck Marcus, all discipline forgotten, all training abandoned, just a father's rage, pure and terrible. Morgan ran. She didn't think, didn't plan, just moved, her feet carrying her to where Marcus lay bleeding in the snow. She fell to her knees beside him, her hands finding the wound, pressing against the terrible flow of blood. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Marcus's eyes were open, unfocused, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The wound was bad, worse than bad. The blade had severed something vital. He was dying, his life pouring out between her fingers. Morgan reached for her power, but it was depleted, drained by the blast that had saved her own life. She could feel it trickling back, but too slowly, far too slowly. "Please," she begged, not knowing who she was begging to. "Please, not him. He's so young. He has so much life left to live." Her hands began to glow. Not the bright silver of her usual power, but something different, something deeper. A warmth that seemed to come not from her own reserves, but from somewhere else entirely. The pendant at her throat, Helena's pendant, was blazing with light. Morgan felt memories flood into her mind. Not her own memories. Helena's. 1,000 moments of healing, 1,000 lives saved. 1,000 times when the first Silver Queen had reached into the darkness and pulled someone back. She understood now. The power wasn't just in her. It was in the legacy, in the bloodline, in the accumulated strength of every healer who had carried this gift before her. Morgan poured everything she had into Marcus, every drop of her own strength, every fragment of borrowed power, every ounce of desperate hope. The wound began to close, slowly at first, then faster, torn flesh knitting together, severed vessels reconnecting, life force stabilizing, strengthening, returning. Marcus gasped, his eyes focusing, his hand reaching up to grip Morgan's arm. "My lady, don't talk." Morgan's voice was barely a whisper. The world was spinning around her. "Just breathe. You're going to be okay." "Morgan!" Rowan's voice again, closer now. The sounds of battle were fading. "Morgan, what have you done?" She looked up to find him standing over her, human again, blood-stained but alive. Behind him, the remaining hunters were fleeing, those who could still move abandoning their fallen comrades to the mountain's cold mercy. "I saved him," she managed. "I had to." Then the darkness took her. She woke to firelight and the smell of pine smoke. For a long moment, she simply lay there, cataloging sensations, warmth against her left side, cold stone beneath her back, a dull ache in her head, and a deeper exhaustion in her bones. "She's awake," Thorn's voice. She turned her head to find him sitting beside her, his scarred face illuminated by the flames of a small fire. Marcus lay nearby, pale but breathing steadily, his chest rising and falling in the rhythm of peaceful sleep. "How long?" Morgan's voice came out as a croak. 6 hours. We moved to a cave higher up the pass. Better defensive position in case they come back." Thorn's eyes glistened in the firelight. "You saved his life. The wound should have killed him in minutes." "Is he?" "He'll recover. Rowan says there's not even a scar." Thorn's voice broke slightly. I've seen a lot of things in my years, my lady, things that would break most men, but I've never seen anything like what you did today. Morgan tried to sit up, but her body refused to cooperate. Thorne eased her back down gently. Rest, we're safe for now. The hunters won't try again tonight, not after the losses they took. Losses? 14 dead, more wounded. We lost Jonas and Willem. Garrett took a bad cut to his leg, but he'll live. 2 dead. 2 of the men who had ridden out with them just that morning, who had joked and laughed around last night's fire. Gone forever. I'm sorry, Morgan whispered. I should have been able to do more. You did more than anyone could have asked. A new voice. Rowan, stepping out of the shadows at the edge of the cave. He looked exhausted, his clothes still stained with blood, but his eyes were bright as he knelt beside her. You saved Marcus when there was no hope left. You drove back an attacker with power you didn't even know you had. You survived. We all survived, thanks to all of you. Thanks to you. Rowan took her hand in his. His grip was warm, strong, reassuring. What you did, that level of healing, it should have been impossible. Even Helena at the height of her power couldn't have done what you did. Helena helped me. Morgan touched the pendant at her throat. It was cool now, dormant, but she could still feel the echo of that borrowed power. I felt her memories, her experiences. It was like she was guiding my hands. Rowan and Thorne exchanged glances. The essence memory, Rowan said quietly. Moira mentioned it during the ritual. The accumulated power of Helena's bloodline, passed down through generations. She said it would grow stronger the more you used it. She also said there would be a cost. Morgan remembered the old seer's warnings. Greater power means greater price. Rest now. Rowan squeezed her hand. We'll worry about costs later. For now, you need to recover your strength. The Forbidden Zone is still half a day's ride ahead. Morgan wanted to argue, to insist that they keep moving, but her body made the decision for her. Sleep rose up like a tide, pulling her down into dreamless darkness. This time it was not dreamless. She stood in a room she did not recognize, though something about it felt achingly familiar. Stone walls carved with intricate patterns, shelves lined with books and scrolls, a window looking out over a valley she knew somehow was the Forbidden Zone, green and lush despite the winter that gripped the lands beyond its borders. And standing at that window, silhouetted against the silver light that filtered through, was a woman with hair the color of moonlight. Helena, Morgan breathed. The woman turned. Her face was beautiful and terrible, marked by a grief so deep it seemed carved into her very bones. Her eyes were silver, like mirrors reflecting something that no longer existed. You came closer to death today than you know, Helena Silvermark said. Her voice was like bells chiming in a distant tower. The power you used to save that young man, it nearly consumed you. I had no choice, he was dying. There is always a choice. Helena moved toward her, gliding rather than walking. I made choices too, choices that seemed right at the time, choices that cost me everything. Your brother. My brother. Helena's expression flickered with pain so raw that Morgan felt it in her own chest. Aldrich was not always a monster, Morgan. Once he was the best of us. Kind, brilliant, driven by a genuine desire to end the suffering that plagued our world. What changed him? Power. The same power that flows through your veins now. Helena raised her hand, and silver light danced across her fingertips. Every time he used the transformation magic, a piece of his humanity was taken as payment. At first, the changes were subtle, a coldness in his eyes, a hardness in his voice. But over time, she closed her fist, extinguishing the light. Over time, there was nothing left of the brother I loved, only the thing he had become. And you couldn't save him. I tried, Helena's voice cracked. I tried everything, reasoning with him, pleading with him, fighting him. In the end, the only way to stop him was to seal him away, to trap him in a prison between life and death, where he would exist but could not act. But the seal didn't last. It was never meant to last forever. I was too weak by then to create something permanent. All I could do was buy time. Time for the world to heal. Time for a new generation to grow strong. Time for... She met Morgan's eyes. Time for you. Morgan felt the weight of those words settle on her shoulders. I'm not you. I can't do what you did. No, you can't. Helena stepped closer, close enough that Morgan could see the tears that glistened in her silver eyes. But you can do something I couldn't. Something I never had the strength for. What? You can save him. Morgan stared at her in disbelief. Save him? Aldrich just sent 20 killers to murder us. He massacred an entire village, including a child. You want me to save him? I want you to have the choice I never had. Helena's hand reached out, touching Morgan's face with fingers that felt like mist. Aldrich is not beyond redemption. The brother I loved is still in there, buried beneath centuries of darkness and madness. If you gather the Covenant stones, if you unite their power, you will have the ability to do what I could not. Not to seal him, not to destroy him, but to heal him, to burn away the corruption and restore the man he was. And if I can't? If there's nothing left to save? Helena's expression hardened. Then you destroy him utterly, end his existence forever, break the cycle that began when he first touched that cursed power. She stepped back. But you must try, Morgan. You must at least try, because if you don't, if you simply destroy him without attempting to save him first, you will become something very like what he became. Power without mercy, strength without compassion, a force of destruction rather than healing. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. Helena's form began to fade, the dream dissolving around them. I left everything I knew in that tower, my memories, my regrets, my hopes. When you reach it, you will understand. You will see what I saw, feel what I felt, and then you will choose. Wait! Morgan reached for her, but her hand passed through empty air. Helena, wait! How do I find the stones? How do I— The tower will show you. Trust in what you are. Helena's voice came from everywhere and nowhere, fading like the last notes of a song. And remember, Morgan Winters, the greatest healing is not of the body, but of the soul. Sometimes even monsters deserve a chance at redemption. Morgan woke with tears on her cheeks and Helena's words echoing in her mind. The fire had burned low. Most of the others were sleeping, their exhausted bodies finally surrendering to rest. But Rowan was still awake, sitting at the mouth of the cave, keeping watch over the pass below. Morgan rose quietly, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, and went to sit beside him. You should be resting, he said without turning. I had a dream. Helena came to me. Now he did turn, his amber eyes sharp with interest. What did she say? Morgan told him everything. The vision of the tower, Helena's grief for her brother, the revelation that Aldrich might be saved rather than destroyed, the burden of choice that now rested on her shoulders. When she finished, Rowan was silent for a long moment. You're thinking about Lysander, Morgan said, about his sister. Among other things. Rowan's voice was heavy. My father, the people of Eldergrove, all the people who have already died because of Aldrich. Is it just to offer redemption to someone who has caused so much suffering? I don't know if it's just. I only know that Helena thought it was necessary, that destroying him without trying to save him first would corrupt me the same way his power corrupted him. And you believe her? Morgan considered the question carefully. I believe she loved her brother. I believe she spent 300 years trapped with the knowledge that she had condemned him to an eternity of imprisonment rather than trying to heal him. I believe that regret shaped everything she left behind. She paused. I believe that when I stood over Marcus today, watching him die, I understood something about the difference between healing and destroying. One creates, one consumes, and once you start consuming, you can't stop. Rowan finished her thought. The power takes over. The darkness grows. Yes. They sat in silence, watching the snow fall over the moonlit mountains. Somewhere out there, Aldrich was preparing for his final release. Somewhere out there, the Silver Hunters were licking their wounds and planning their next attack. Somewhere out there, a war was beginning that would determine the fate of everyone Morgan had come to care about. Whatever you decide, Rowan said finally, I will stand beside you. If you choose to try to save him, I will help you. If you choose to destroy him, I will help with that too. But the choice must be yours, Morgan. This is your burden to carry. Our burden. Morgan reached out and took his hand. You said it yourself. Where I go, you go. We carry this together. His fingers intertwined with hers, warm despite the cold. Together, he agreed. Dawn found them already riding, pushing through the final stretch of mountain passes toward the Forbidden Zone. The snow had stopped during the night, leaving the world blanketed in pristine white. Under other circumstances, it might have been beautiful. Now, it simply made them easier to track. But no hunters appeared to challenge them. Either the survivors of yesterday's ambush had retreated to report their failure, or they were gathering their strength for another attempt. Neither possibility was comforting. It was mid-morning when Eleonora, riding at the front of their diminished column, raised her hand to signal a halt. "There," she said, pointing ahead. Morgan urged Moonshade forward until she could see what Eleonora had spotted. Before them, the mountain pass opened into a wide valley, and spanning the valley's entrance, rising from the snow like a wall of dreams, was a barrier of silver mist. The edge of the Forbidden Zone. "I've heard about this," Lysander breathed. "My grandfather told me stories. He said the mist moves like it's alive, that it shows you your worst fears if you try to enter." "For most people, that's exactly what it does." Rowan brought his horse alongside Morgan's. The barriers were designed to keep intruders out. They respond to the intent of whoever approaches. If you come with hostile purpose, they destroy you. If you come with innocent purpose, they simply turn you away. But for you, they're supposed to let me pass. Morgan studied the swirling silver mist. It was beautiful in a terrible way, patterns constantly forming and dissolving within its depths. She could feel it calling to her, a pull in her chest that was almost physical. "I can feel it. It knows I'm here." "Then let's not keep it waiting." Thorn guided his horse to her other side. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face showing the strain of watching over Marcus through the night, but his voice was steady. "The sooner we get inside, the sooner we find what we're looking for." Morgan dismounted and handed Moonshade's reins to Garrett, who had insisted on continuing despite the wound in his leg. The others dismounted as well, forming up behind her as she approached the barrier. Up close, the mist was even more unnerving. It seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat, each surge bringing it slightly closer before it retreated. And within it, Morgan could see shapes, faces, images that flickered too quickly to identify, but left impressions of memory nonetheless. She raised her hand and touched the barrier. The world inverted. For an instant, she was everywhere and nowhere. She felt the weight of 3 centuries pressing down on her. She heard voices, thousands of them, whispering secrets in languages she didn't understand. She saw Helena standing before this same barrier, pouring her life force into its creation. She saw Aldrich, his face still human then, reaching out to stop her and being hurled back by forces beyond his comprehension. And then the mist parted. It opened before her like curtains being drawn aside, revealing the valley beyond. Green grass and blooming flowers despite the winter that gripped the mountains, trees heavy with fruit, a stream of water so clear it seemed to glow, and at the center of it all, rising toward the sky like a finger pointing at the heavens, the Memory Tower. Morgan stepped through the barrier, and the others followed. The moment they crossed the threshold, the cold vanished, replaced by warmth that seemed to seep into their bones. Marcus, who had been pale and silent all morning, straightened in surprise as color returned to his cheeks. "The healing properties of this place," Rowan said, looking around in wonder. "I've heard legends, but I never imagined—" "This is what Helena created," Morgan murmured. "A sanctuary, a place where nothing could touch her or those she protected." "Then why did she die here?" Lysander asked. "If this place is so powerful, why couldn't it save her?" Morgan didn't have an answer. She wasn't sure she wanted one. They left the horses to graze in the impossibly green meadow and approached the tower on foot. Up close, it was even more impressive than it had appeared from a distance. The stone was white, veined with silver that seemed to pulse with inner light. There were no windows, no visible doors, just smooth walls rising toward a peak lost in the silvery clouds above. Morgan pressed her palm against the stone. The wall dissolved before her touch, revealing an entrance that hadn't existed a moment before. Spiral stairs wound upward into darkness, lit only by the soft glow of the silver veins in the walls. "Wait here," she said to the others. "I don't know what's up there, but Helena's message said only her heir could enter." "Morgan," Rowan's voice was tight with concern. "I'll be fine." She tried to smile reassuringly. "Whatever Helena left for me, it's not going to hurt me. It's the whole reason we came here." She began to climb. The stairs seemed to go on forever, spiraling up and up through the heart of the tower. The silver light grew brighter as she ascended, and with it came a sensation she couldn't quite identify. Not warmth exactly, not pressure. Something else, something that felt like memory. By the time she reached the top, she was no longer entirely herself. The chamber at the tower's peak was circular, its walls lined with shelves that held books and scrolls and objects she couldn't identify. At its center stood a pedestal of pure silver, and on that pedestal rested a single stone. It was small, perhaps the size of a closed fist, and it glowed with the same silver light that permeated the entire tower. The first covenant stone. Morgan approached it slowly, reverently. As she drew closer, she became aware that she was not alone in the chamber. Helena Silvermark stood before the pedestal, as real and solid as she had been in the dream. But this was no dream. Morgan could feel the heat of her presence, smell the faint scent of flowers that clung to her hair. "You came," Helena said. "I knew you would." "Is this really you, or just another memory?" "Both. Neither." Helena smiled sadly. "I left so much of myself in this tower that the distinction no longer matters. What you see is what remains of me, what I was, what I hoped to be, what I ultimately became." "The stone," Morgan nodded toward the pedestal. "That's what I need." "It is only the beginning." Helena moved aside, gesturing for Morgan to approach. "The first stone holds my memories of Aldrich, of who he was before the darkness, of what we were to each other. You will need those memories if you are to have any hope of reaching him." Morgan stepped forward and reached for the stone. The moment her fingers touched it, the world exploded into light. She was Helena now, young Helena, barely 20 years old, standing in a meadow with her brother Aldrich. He was handsome then, his hair dark instead of white, his eyes warm instead of cold. They were laughing about something, some joke she couldn't quite remember, and the love between them was so pure and strong that it ached. She was Helena at 30, watching Aldrich perform the first transformation ritual, watching the wonder in his eyes as a volunteer shifted from human to wolf and back again, watching the beginning of something that would eventually destroy them both. She was Helena at 40, confronting the thing her brother had become, begging him to stop, pleading with him to remember who he was, and seeing nothing in his silver eyes but hunger and madness. She was Helena at the end, pouring her life into a seal that would hold her brother's darkness at bay, feeling herself fade, year by year, memory by memory, until there was nothing left but this tower and the hope that someday someone would finish what she had started. Morgan came back to herself gasping, tears streaming down her face, the stone clutched in her hand like a lifeline. "Now you understand," Helena's voice said, though the figure before her was fading. "Now you know what he was, what he could be again. The choice is yours, Morgan Winters. Save him or destroy him, heal or kill, but whatever you choose, choose wisely." The apparition vanished, and Morgan was alone in the tower with the first covenant stone, and the weight of 300 years of history pressing down on her soul. She had come seeking knowledge. She had found something far more precious and far more terrible. She had found hope, and with it, the burden of deciding whether a monster deserved to be saved. She stood there for a long moment, clutching the stone, feeling its warmth spread through her body. Then, slowly, she turned and began the long descent back to her companions. They were waiting at the base of the tower, their faces a mixture of anxiety and hope. Rowan stepped forward the moment she emerged, his hands finding her shoulders, his eyes searching her face. "You were gone for 3 hours," he said. "We were about to come after you." 3 hours? It had felt like a lifetime, several lifetimes. "I found it." Morgan opened her hand, revealing the first covenant stone. "And I found more. So much more." "What did you see?" Lysander demanded. "What's in there?" Morgan looked at him, at the grief that still burned in his eyes, and knew that what she was about to say might destroy whatever fragile alliance had formed between them. "I saw who Aldrich was before he became a monster," she said carefully, "and I was given a choice. Destroy him completely, or try to save him, try to burn away the darkness and restore the man he was before the power consumed him." Lysander's face went blank. "Save him." It's what Helena wanted. She believed there was still something worth saving, something human, buried beneath centuries of darkness. Helena was his sister. Of course she wanted to believe that. Lysander's voice was rising. "But my sister is dead. My mother is dead. Hundreds of people are dead. And you want to save the thing that killed them? I want to have the choice." Morgan met his fury with calm she didn't entirely feel. "The final choice will come when we face him. But if I go in determined to destroy, if I close my mind to any other possibility, then I become exactly what he is, power without mercy, strength without compassion. That's philosophical nonsense. No. Rowan's voice cut through the argument. She's right. He looked at Lysander with understanding in his eyes. I want to kill him too, for my father, for everyone who's suffered because of him. But if Morgan says there's a chance to save him, to end this cycle of violence permanently instead of just postponing it, then we owe it to everyone we've lost to try. Lysander stared at them both, his jaw working. For a moment, Morgan thought he might strike someone. Then abruptly, the tension drained from his body, replaced by something that looked almost like despair. If you fail, he said quietly, if you try to save him and he kills more people because of it, that blood will be on your hands. I know. Morgan tucked the stone into her pouch. It's a burden I'm willing to carry. The question is, are you willing to help me carry it? Lysander was silent for a long moment. Then finally he nodded. For my sister, he said. Because she would have wanted mercy. Because she was too young to know how to hate. He met Morgan's eyes. I'll help you try to save him. But if it doesn't work, if there's nothing left to save, I want to be the one who ends him. If it comes to that, Morgan said, you'll have your chance. They made camp that night in the shadow of the tower, surrounded by the impossible spring of the Forbidden Zone. Tomorrow they would begin the journey back. Tomorrow they would face whatever Aldrich had prepared for them. Tomorrow the real battle would begin. But tonight, for a few precious hours, they rested in a place where darkness could not reach them. And Morgan Winters, clutching the first covenant stone against her heart, dreamed of a world where even monsters could be saved. The journey out of the Forbidden Zone was nothing like the journey in. Where before they had ridden with the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them, now they moved with purpose. The first covenant stone rested against Morgan's heart, warm and pulsing with ancient power. 1 stone of 7, the first step on a path that would lead either to salvation or destruction. They emerged from the silver mist barrier into a world transformed. The snow that had blanketed the mountain passes was gone, replaced by the gray slush of early thaw. The air carried a different quality, a heaviness that spoke of change coming, of storms on the horizon. How long were we in there? Eleonora asked, looking around in confusion. It felt like a day, maybe 2. Time moves differently within the Forbidden Zone, Morgan replied, the knowledge coming to her unbidden, a gift from the memories she had absorbed. What felt like hours to us may have been days in the outside world. Thorne's scarred face tightened with concern. If days have passed, then Silvermount. He didn't need to finish the sentence. They all understood. Every day that passed was a day for Thornfield to consolidate his hold on the capital, a day for the Silver Hunters to regroup, a day for Aldrich to grow stronger. They pushed their horses hard, descending from the mountains with reckless speed. The animals seemed to sense their riders' urgency, finding reserves of strength that should have been exhausted long ago. Perhaps the healing properties of the Forbidden Zone had affected them too. Or perhaps they simply understood that the fate of the world depended on reaching their destination in time. It was on the second day of their descent that the messenger hawk found them. The bird circled twice before diving toward Rowan, landing on his outstretched arm with a flutter of gray wings. A small cylinder was attached to its leg, sealed with wax that bore the imprint of Elder Moira's personal sigil. Rowan broke the seal and unrolled the tiny scroll within. As he read, his face went pale. "What is it?" Morgan asked, though she already knew from his expression that the news was bad. "Thornfield has declared himself regent of Silvermount. He claims I abandoned the kingdom in its hour of need, that I am unfit to rule." Rowan's voice was steady, but his hands trembled slightly as he held the scroll. "General Ravencrest has been arrested on charges of treason. Moira has gone into hiding with those still loyal to the crown." "The timeline," Lysander said grimly. "We've been gone longer than we thought." 5 days. Rowan crumpled the scroll in his fist. 5 days since we left Silvermount. Thornfield moved faster than anyone anticipated, because he's not acting alone. Morgan felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. Aldrich is directing him. This isn't just a power grab. It's a coordinated attack on everything that could oppose him. "Then we go back." Eleonora's hand went to her sword. "We take back Silvermount and deal with Thornfield." "No." The word came from Morgan, surprising even herself with its firmness. "That's exactly what Aldrich wants. He's trying to split our forces, to distract us from the real objective. If we go back now, we lose our chance to gather the remaining stones. So we just abandoned Silvermount? Eleanor's voice was sharp with disbelief. Abandon the people who are counting on us? We trust them to hold. Morgan looked at Rowan, willing him to understand. Moira is there. Ravencrest's loyalists are there. They can fight a holding action while we do what only we can do. Gather the stones, build the power we need to end this permanently. Rowan was silent for a long moment, his jaw clenched, his eyes distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was heavy with the weight of command. Morgan is right. Thornfield is a symptom, not the disease. Even if we took back Silvermount today, Aldrich would simply find another way to strike at us. The only way to truly end this is to face him with enough power to either save or destroy him. He looked at his sister. We continue to Ironwood. Lysander's father can provide troops to help retake Silvermount while we pursue the remaining stones. Eleanor looked like she wanted to argue, but something in her brother's expression stopped her. Fine. But the moment we have what we need from Ironwood, I'm leading the force to take back our home. I wouldn't have it any other way. They rode on, the shadow of Silvermount's fall hanging over them like a storm cloud. Morgan found herself riding beside Thorn, who had been unusually quiet since leaving the Forbidden Zone. You're thinking about Ravencrest, she said. The old soldier nodded slowly. Dominic and I served together in the Southern Border War. He was a captain then. I was just a sergeant. He saved my unit from being overrun at the Battle of Thornwood Pass. A bitter laugh escaped him. Same battle where Garrett's father died. Funny how the same moment can be salvation for some and tragedy for others. He's still alive. Arrested isn't the same as executed. Thornfield isn't known for his patience or his mercy. Every hour we delay is an hour closer to Dominic's death. Thorn met her eyes. I'm not questioning your strategy, my lady. I understand the logic, but understanding doesn't make it easier to accept. No, Morgan agreed. It doesn't. But we carry our burdens and we keep moving. It's all any of us can do. Thorn was quiet for a moment. Then, unexpectedly, he smiled. It was a small thing, barely visible beneath his beard, but genuine. You sound like a commander, he said. A real one. Not someone playing at leadership, but someone who understands what it costs. I was a battlefield medic. We learned quickly that we couldn't save everyone, that trying to save everyone meant saving no one. Morgan looked at the road ahead, at the mountains giving way to the forests of the lowlands. The hardest lesson wasn't learning to make those choices. It was learning to live with them afterward. And do you live with them? Some days better than others. But I keep trying. That's all any of us can do. The forests of Ironwood rose before them on the fourth day, ancient trees whose trunks were wider than houses and whose canopies blocked out the sky. Unlike the bare winter woods they had traveled through before, these trees were green and lush, their leaves rustling with a sound like whispered secrets. Magic lived in these woods. Morgan could feel it. Old magic, predating even Helena Silvermark's time. Lysander rode at the head of their column now, his back straight with pride despite the grief that still shadowed his eyes. This was his homeland. Whatever else had happened, whatever horrors he had witnessed, this place was still his. The Border Patrol will have seen us by now, he said as they passed beneath the first of the great trees. They'll have sent word to my father. He'll be expecting us. Expecting us or expecting trouble? Eleanor asked. With my father, there's rarely a difference. They rode for another hour before the welcoming party appeared. A dozen riders emerged from the forest shadows, their armor crafted from bark and living wood, their faces painted with the green and brown patterns of their clan. At their head rode a massive man with shoulders like a bear and a face that looked like it had been carved from the same ancient wood as the forest around them. Lysander. The man's voice was deep as thunder rolling through valleys. You return with strangers. Explain. Commander Oakheart. Lysander inclined his head respectfully. These are allies, not strangers. The Alpha King, Rowan Blackthorn, his sister, Princess Eleonora, and Lady Morgan Winters, heir to the Silver Queen. We come seeking audience with my father. Oakheart's eyes swept over their small party, lingering on Morgan with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The heir to the Silver Queen. We've heard rumors. He spurred his horse forward until he was directly in front of her. You don't look like much. Appearances can be deceiving, Commander. Morgan met his gaze without flinching, as I'm sure you know better than most. Something flickered in Oakheart's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. You have fire. Good. You'll need it where you're going." He wheeled his horse around. "Follow. The king is waiting." The palace of Ironwood was unlike anything Morgan had ever seen. It wasn't built so much as grown, shaped from living trees that had been encouraged over centuries to form walls and towers and bridges. Light filtered through leaves that served as windows. Vines heavy with flowers draped over archways. The entire structure breathed with the pulse of nature, a testament to the harmony between the ironwood shifters and the forest that was their home. King Fenris awaited them in the great hall, a vast chamber formed from the hollowed trunk of a tree so massive that its interior could have housed a small village. He sat on a throne of twisted roots, a crown of leaves and silver upon his white hair. He was old, older than Morgan had expected, his face weathered by time and scarred by violence, but his single remaining eye burned with a fire that age had not dimmed. "So," his voice echoed through the chamber like wind through branches, "my son returns with the woman who claims to be Helena's heir." "I make no claims, Your Majesty." Morgan stepped forward, conscious of the guards that lined the walls, of the tension that crackled in the air. "I am what I am. The question is whether you believe it." "Belief is a luxury I abandoned long ago." Fenris rose from his throne, moving with a grace that belied his years. "I believe in what I can see, what I can touch, what I can verify with my own eyes." He stopped before her, his single eye boring into her face. "My son tells me you have the first covenant stone. Show me." Morgan reached into her pouch and withdrew the stone. It pulsed with silver light the moment it touched her fingers, responding to her presence like a living thing. Around the hall, she heard gasps of surprise. Fenris stared at the stone for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out to touch it. The moment his fingers made contact, he recoiled as if burned. "It's real." His voice was barely a whisper. "By the old gods, it's actually real." "The stone recognizes Helena's blood," Morgan said. "It responds to those who carry her legacy. It rejects all others." "My grandmother told me stories of these stones when I was a boy." Fenris was still staring at the glowing artifact, his expression unreadable. "I thought they were myths, fairy tales to frighten children and inspire fools." "They're real, Father." Lysander stepped forward. "I've seen what Lady Morgan can do. I've seen her power, and I've seen what we're up against. Aldrich Silvermark has returned. He's the one behind the attack on Eldergrove, behind—" His voice cracked. "Behind Linnea's death." The name hung in the air like a blade. Fenris's face contorted with pain. "Your sister, my granddaughter. She was visiting her cousins in Eldergrove." "I know. I found her body myself." Father and son stared at each other across a gulf of shared grief. Morgan saw the moment when something shifted in the old king's expression, the suspicion giving way to something raw, something that demanded action rather than caution. "What do you need?" Fenris asked, turning back to Morgan. "Tell me what you require to destroy the monster who killed my grandchild." "Not destroy." Morgan chose her words carefully. "At least, not necessarily. The stones give me the power to face Aldrich. But Helena's legacy also gives me a choice, to destroy him utterly or to try to save him, to heal the corruption that transformed him from a man into a monster." The silence that followed was absolute. "Save him." Fenris's voice was flat, dangerous. "You want to save the creature that butchered 300 innocent people, that murdered a child of 8 years. I want to have the choice." Morgan stood her ground, though every instinct screamed at her to back away from the fury building in the old king's eye. Helena believed there was still something worth saving in her brother, something human, buried beneath centuries of darkness. "If I can reach that part of him, I can end this cycle of violence permanently. But if I can't, if there's nothing left to save, then yes, I will destroy him, utterly and completely." "Father!" Lysander moved to stand beside Morgan. "I felt the same way you do now. I still feel it. But Morgan is right. If we simply destroy Aldrich, we become what he is. Power without mercy, strength without compassion. That's not what Linnea would have wanted." "Don't tell me what my granddaughter would have wanted." Fenris's voice was a growl. "You have no right." "I have every right. She was my sister. I loved her more than anything in this world. And I know, as certainly as I know my own name, that she would have wanted us to be better than our enemies, to find another way." Fenris stared at his son for a long moment. Then, abruptly, the tension drained from his shoulders. He suddenly looked every one of his 65 years. "You've changed," he said quietly. "The boy who left here a week ago would have demanded blood for blood. The boy who left here a week ago hadn't seen what I've seen, hadn't understood what we're truly fighting against." Lysander took his father's hand. "Help us, Father, not for revenge, for justice, for the chance to build something better from the ashes of what was lost." Fenris was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to one of the guards. "Summon the queen and prepare the sacred chamber. We have a stone to retrieve." The Ironwood Covenant stone was kept in the heart of the oldest tree in the forest, a massive oak that had stood for over 1,000 years. The sacred chamber was reached through a tunnel of living roots, lit by phosphorescent fungi that glowed with soft green light. It felt like walking into the earth itself, descending into a place where time had no meaning. Queen Elindra met them at the entrance to the chamber. She was younger than Morgan had expected, perhaps 50, with hair still more brown than gray, and eyes the color of spring leaves. There was something fragile about her, a translucence to her skin that spoke of illness long endured. "So you are the one," she said, her voice soft but clear, "the one the prophecies spoke of." "I am Morgan Winters, Your Majesty." "I know who you are." Elindra smiled, and despite her frailty, there was warmth in it. "I've been dreaming of you for months now, a woman with healing hands coming out of the winter, coming to change everything." "You're a seer?" "Of sorts. Not like the old woman in Silvermount. My gift is smaller, quieter, but it showed me enough to know that this moment was coming." She glanced at her husband. "Fenris has his doubts. He always does. But I have none. You are exactly who you claim to be, and you will do exactly what you came here to do." Fenris made a sound that might have been agreement, or might have been resignation. "The stone is through here. It has been guarded by my family for 300 years, passed down from monarch to monarch, waiting for this day." They entered the chamber together. It was circular, the walls formed from interwoven roots that pulsed with faint green light. At the center stood a pedestal of pure white wood, and upon it rested a stone that glowed with verdant fire. "The Stone of Life," Elindra said. "Helena charged my ancestor with its protection. She said it contained the essence of growth, of renewal, of the endless cycle of death and rebirth that governs all living things." Morgan approached this pedestal slowly, reverently. The stone seemed to pulse faster as she drew near, its green light mixing with the silver glow of the first stone still in her pouch. 2 different colors, 2 different aspects of power, but she could feel how they complemented each other, how they were meant to work together. She reached out and touched the Stone of Life. Power surged through her like spring floods through dry riverbeds. She saw visions of forests growing and falling and growing again, of generations of Ironwood rulers guarding this sacred trust, of Helena herself, standing in this very chamber 3 centuries ago, tears streaming down her face as she divided her brother's power and scattered it across the 7 territories. And beneath it all, she felt something else, a presence, ancient and patient, that spoke without words. "You carry 2 of 7. The balance begins to shift, but beware, child of silver. With each stone you claim, your enemy grows more desperate, more dangerous. The final battle approaches faster than you know." Morgan opened her eyes to find everyone staring at her. The Stone of Life rested in her palm, its green glow now intertwined with the silver light that emanated from the pouch at her hip. "It's done," she said, her voice steady despite the enormity of what she had just experienced. 2 stones, 5 to go, and less time than we thought." The words came out before she could stop them. "Aldrich knows what we're doing. He's accelerating his plans. We need to move faster." Fenris and Elindra exchanged glances. Then the king nodded. "You'll have everything Ironwood can offer. Troops, supplies, whatever you need." He hesitated, then added, "And my own sword, if you'll have it." "Father," Lysander began, but Fenris cut him off. "I'm old, boy, not dead, and I haven't lifted a blade in anger for 10 years, but for my granddaughter's memory, for the chance to see justice done." He drew himself up to his full height. "I'll fight one more time." "Your Majesty," Morgan said carefully, "we would be honored, but Silvermount is under siege. We need someone to lead the liberation while we continue gathering the stones." "Then let me do that." Eleonora stepped forward. Give me command of whatever forces you can spare. Lysander knows this land, he can guide us, and I know Silvermount better than anyone. Together we can take back the capital while Morgan and Rowan continue the quest." Rowan looked at his sister for a long moment. Morgan could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to protect warring with the knowledge that Eleonora was right, that she was the best choice for this mission. "You're sure?" he asked. "I've never been more sure of anything." Eleonora's jaw was set with determination. "Our home is in enemy hands. Our people are suffering. Someone needs to do something about it, and that someone should be me." Rowan turned to Fenris. "How many troops can you spare?" 200 of our best. More would take too long to muster." The old king's eye gleamed. "But 200 Ironwood warriors are worth 1,000 of anyone else's, and I'll lead them myself." "Then we have a plan." Morgan looked around at the assembled faces, feeling the weight of leadership settle more firmly on her shoulders. Eleonora, Lysander, and King Fenris will lead the liberation of Silvermount. Rowan and I will continue to the remaining kingdoms, gathering the stones. We'll meet back at Silvermount when both objectives are complete. "And if one of us fails?" Lysander asked quietly. "Then the other continues." Morgan's voice was hard, because it had to be. "The mission is bigger than any of us. Bigger than Silvermount. Bigger than revenge or justice or anything else. If Aldrich achieves full freedom, if the seal breaks completely, nothing else will matter. We have to succeed. There is no alternative." The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. They all knew the stakes, they all knew the risks, and they all knew that this might be the last time they stood together. "Then let's not waste any more time," Rowan said. "Every hour counts." The farewell was brief but meaningful. Eleonora embraced her brother fiercely, whispering something in his ear that Morgan couldn't hear. Lysander clasped forearms with Rowan in the warrior's gesture of respect. And then it was Morgan's turn. Thorn approached her with Marcus at his side. The young guard had recovered remarkably well from his near-fatal wound, though a faint scar still marked the place where death had almost claimed him. "My lady," Thorn's voice was gruff with emotion, "Marcus and I have discussed it. We believe our place is with you, if you'll have us." "You don't want to go back to Silvermount to help retake your home?" "Silvermount will be in good hands with the princess, but you—" Thorn glanced at Marcus, who nodded slightly. "You saved my boy's life. Where I come from, that creates a bond that can't be broken. We're with you, my lady, to the end." Morgan felt tears prick at her eyes, though she blinked them back. "Then I'm honored to have you, both of you." The final member of their reduced party was unexpected. As they prepared to ride out, a figure emerged from the shadows of the palace. "Room for one more?" It was Queen Elindra, dressed not in royal finery, but in the practical leather armor of a forest ranger. A bow was slung across her back, a quiver of arrows at her hip. "My love," Fenris began, but she silenced him with a look. "I've spent 10 years dying slowly in that palace, Fenris. 10 years watching my strength fade, feeling the life drain out of me day by day." She moved to stand beside Morgan. "This woman healed me. I felt it when she touched the stone of life. Something shifted. Something that had been broken for a decade suddenly began to mend." Morgan remembered the warmth that had flowed through her when she claimed the stone. She hadn't thought about where it went, only about the power she had gained. But now, looking at the color in Elindra's cheeks, the strength in her stance, the queen was poisoned, she realized. Like the women in Silvermount, someone was killing her slowly. "Lord Ashford?" Elindra's voice was cold. "My husband's most trusted advisor. He's been adding something to my tea for years. I never suspected. He was always so kind, so attentive." "Ashford is a puppet," Morgan said, "like Thornfield in Silvermount. Aldrich has been placing his agents throughout the 7 territories for months, maybe years, preparing for this moment." Fenris's face was a mask of fury. "Ashford will answer for his crimes." "He already has." Elindra's smile was grim. "I visited him this morning, before he could learn of your arrival. He chose death rather than interrogation, but not before I learned the extent of his treachery." She pulled a small scroll from her armor and handed it to Morgan. This was hidden in his chambers, a list of Aldrich's agents throughout the 7 territories, not complete but enough to start unraveling his network. Morgan unrolled the scroll, her eyes scanning the names. Some she recognized, others were strangers, but one name leaped out at her, making her blood run cold. "Thornfield was compromised 6 months ago," she read aloud, "the same time that King Blackthorn was assassinated." Rowan went very still. "My father," he said quietly. Aldrich killed my father. Through Thornfield, yes. The assassination was the first move in a larger plan. Remove the strong leaders, create chaos, pave the way for his return. Morgan rolled up the scroll and tucked it into her pouch alongside the stones. Another piece of the puzzle. Another confirmation of just how far Aldrich's influence had spread. All the more reason to move quickly, she said. 5 stones remain, 5 kingdoms to visit, and according to my visions, less than 15 days until the 7th red moon rises and Aldrich achieves full power. Then stop talking and start riding. Alindra swung onto a horse with the ease of someone who had spent decades in the saddle. I've been trapped in a sickbed for 10 years. I intend to make up for lost time. They rode out of Ironwood as the sun began to set, a small band of 5 against the gathering darkness. Morgan, Rowan, Thorn, Marcus, and the newly revitalized Queen Alindra. Behind them, Eleonora and Lysander were already marshalling forces for the assault on Silvermount. Ahead lay 5 more kingdoms, 5 more stones, and countless dangers yet unknown. The first red moon rose that night. Morgan saw it from their campsite at the edge of Ironwood territory, a crimson eye staring down from the heavens. The prophecy was in motion now. 7 red moons, 7 nights, and then Aldrich would be free completely. Whatever restrictions still bound him, whatever limitations remained from Helena's ancient seal, they would shatter when that 7th moon reached its peak. "It's beautiful," Alindra said, joining Morgan at the edge of the camp. "In a terrible way. Everything about this is terrible." Morgan couldn't tear her eyes from the blood-colored light. 300 years of peace, and it all comes down to a handful of people racing against time. That's how it always is in the stories. Alindra sat down beside her. A small group against impossible odds, the fate of the world in the balance. This isn't a story. This is real. People are dying. More will die before it's over. "I know." The Queen's voice was soft. "I've watched people die. I felt death creeping through my own veins for a decade. But you know what I've learned from that experience?" Morgan shook her head. "That death isn't the enemy. Fear is. Fear of death, fear of failure, fear of not being enough." Alindra reached out and took Morgan's hand. "You carry an enormous burden, Lady Morgan. The hopes of everyone who's ever believed in the prophecy of the Silver Queen. But you don't carry it alone. None of us do. That's the secret the old stories don't always tell. The hero wins not because they're stronger or smarter or braver than everyone else. They win because they have people beside them who refuse to let them fall." Morgan thought of Rowan, sleeping by the fire with one hand on his sword, of Thorn and Marcus keeping watch at the perimeter, of Eleonora and Lysander riding toward danger with an army at their backs, of King Fenris setting aside his grief to fight one more time. "I'm afraid," she admitted, "not of dying, of failing, of not being strong enough when the moment comes." "Good." Alindra squeezed her hand. "The day you stop being afraid is the day you become dangerous. Not to your enemies, but to yourself. Fear keeps us humble, keeps us careful, keeps us human." They sat together in silence for a while, watching the red moon climb higher in the sky. Then Alindra spoke again. "When I was dying, I used to dream of a woman made of silver light. She would stand at the foot of my bed and watch over me through the long nights. I never knew who she was until today." "Helena." "Yes. She was waiting, I think, watching, making sure that when her heir finally arrived, I would be here to help." Alindra smiled. "She chose well, Lady Morgan. Whatever doubts you have about yourself, know that you were chosen by someone who saw across centuries, who knew exactly what was needed and selected you to provide it." "I'm not sure that makes me feel better." "It's not meant to. It's meant to remind you that you're not alone, that you never have been. The blood of queens flows in your veins, the power of generations rests in your hands, and the love of everyone who's ever believed in the dream of peace stands behind you." Alindra rose to her feet. "Get some sleep, Lady Morgan. Tomorrow brings new challenges. You'll need your strength." She walked back to the fire, leaving Morgan alone with the red moon and her thoughts. Tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until the 7th moon rose and the final battle began, Morgan reached into her pouch and withdrew the 2 stones. Silver and green light intertwined around her fingers, pulsing in harmony with her heartbeat. Power, more than she had ever known, more than she had ever dreamed, and still not enough, not yet. She closed her eyes and reached out with her senses, feeling for the distant echoes of the remaining stones. 5 points of light scattered across the 7 territories. 5 pieces of a puzzle that would either save the world or doom it. As she searched, something else touched her consciousness. Something dark. Something ancient. Something that had been watching and waiting for 300 years. "Hello, little queen." Aldrich's voice slithered through her mind like a snake through tall grass. "You've done well. 2 stones already, but the game is just beginning. Enjoy your small victories while you can. They will taste like ashes soon enough." Morgan tried to push him out, to slam close the door he had opened in her mind, but he was too strong, too practiced. "I've been inside your predecessors' minds for centuries," he continued. "Helena thought she could keep me out too. She learned otherwise, as will you. Get out of my head." She spoke the words aloud, and the power of the stones responded. Silver and green light flared around her, burning through the darkness that had crept into her thoughts. Aldrich's presence recoiled, but not before she caught a glimpse of what lay behind his words. Fear. Beneath the arrogance, beneath the malice, Aldrich Silvermark was afraid. Afraid of her. Afraid of what she represented. Afraid that after 300 years, his sister's legacy might finally succeed in destroying him. Or saving him. The connection broke. Morgan gasped, falling forward onto her hands and knees, the stones tumbling from her grip. Her heart was racing. Her breath came in ragged gasps, but beneath the fear and exhaustion, something else burned. Determination. She picked up the stones and returned them to her pouch. Then she walked back to the camp, to her companions, to the small circle of firelight that held back the darkness. Rowan was awake now, watching her with concerned eyes. "Are you all right?" "No." Morgan sat down beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "But I will be. We all will be." "What happened?" "Aldrich. He tried to get inside my head, but I pushed him out." She looked up at the red moon, still climbing toward its peak. "He's afraid of us, Rowan. Beneath all his power and arrogance, he's afraid. Then we use that fear." Rowan's hand found hers in the darkness. "We make him regret ever underestimating us. We make him regret a lot of things." Morgan squeezed his fingers, starting with the day he decided to become a monster. They sat together as the night deepened and the red moon reached its zenith. Around them, their companions slept, trusting in the guards and wards that protected their camp. Somewhere to the south, Eleonora and Lysander were preparing to liberate Silvermount. Somewhere in the darkness, Aldrich was plotting his next move. And somewhere in the future, a confrontation was waiting. A battle that would decide the fate of everything. But that was for later. For now, there was this moment, this fire, these people who had become family despite everything that had tried to tear them apart. "We're going to win," Morgan said quietly. "I don't know how I know that, but I do." "Of course we are." Rowan's voice held a smile. "We have the heir of the Silver Queen on our side. What chance does a 300-year-old dark wizard have against that?" Morgan laughed, surprising herself. "You're an idiot." "I'm your idiot." Rowan lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." The red moon began its descent toward the horizon. Dawn was coming, and with it, the beginning of the next phase of their impossible quest. 5 stones, 14 days, and a world waiting to be saved. Morgan Winters, healer, survivor, heir to the Silver Queen, watched the first hints of light appear on the eastern horizon and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the naive hope of someone who didn't understand what they were facing, but the fierce, determined hope of someone who knew exactly how dark the darkness was and chose to believe in the light anyway. That was the legacy Helena Silvermark had left behind. Not just power or prophecy, but hope. The belief that even the darkest night would eventually give way to dawn. That even the most terrible evil could be overcome by those willing to stand against it. Morgan carried that hope now, and she would carry it until the very end, whatever that end might be. The sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day, a new beginning, and somewhere in the distance, 5 points of light waited to be claimed. The quest continued. As the camp stirred to life around her, Morgan found herself watching each of her companions with new eyes. Thorn, checking weapons with the methodical precision of a man who had survived countless battles by never leaving anything to chance. Marcus, young and eager, helping to break down the tents with an energy that belied the near-death experience he had suffered just days before. Alindra, moving with a grace and strength that seemed impossible for someone who had been on death's door so recently, her eyes bright with purpose. And Rowan, always Rowan, the Alpha King who had set aside his crown to walk beside her into darkness, who had trusted her judgment when others doubted, who had held her hand in the night and promised to stand with her until the very end. They were more than companions now, more than allies. They were family, forged in the fires of shared danger and bound by something stronger than blood. "Ready to ride?" Thorne asked, leading the horses toward where Morgan stood. "As ready as I'll ever be." That's what every soldier says before their first battle. The old warrior's scarred face softened. And their second and their 10th. The ones who survive are the ones who keep riding anyway. Morgan took Moonshade's reins and swung into the saddle. Around her, the others mounted up, forming the small column that would carry hope across the 7 territories. "Where to first?" Alindra asked. Morgan closed her eyes, reaching out with her senses toward the distant pulse of the remaining stones. 5 points of light scattered across the map. 5 trials yet to face. "East," she said, opening her eyes. "The kingdom of Stormhaven. Their stone calls the loudest." "Stormhaven," Rowan urged his horse alongside hers. "That's a 2-day ride if we push hard." "Then we push hard." Morgan looked at each of her companions in turn, seeing in their faces the same determination that burned in her own heart. "We have a world to save. Let's not keep it waiting." She kicked Moonshade into a gallop, and the others followed. Behind them, the red-stained sky of dawn gave way to the clear blue of a new day. Before them lay dangers unknown and trials unimagined. But they rode together, bound by loyalty and love and the unshakable belief that even the darkest evil could be overcome. Morgan Winters had been a healer all her life, had spent years mending wounds and saving lives and fighting against death itself. Now she would heal a world, or die trying.